recognize some very important people, VIPs if you will, and then we'll get everybody else after them. So, if you are a Vietnam veteran, please stand and be recognized. Vietnam veterans, you are the very important people here today. We're glad that you're here. We know that when you returned home, at best you were shunned, at worst you were overtly disrespected. And this occurred even though your service was as honorable as any others who went to war before you and since. You have waited far too long for an expression of gratitude for your honorable service and sacrifice, and you will wait no longer. The country's treatment of Vietnam veterans is a stain on American history that rightfully should be addressed before it is too late. Vietnam veterans, it is in this spirit that we are assembled here to honor your service and sacrifice, as well as that of your buddies who are not here today, by embracing you and sincerely saying, thank you and welcome home. Ladies and gentlemen, find a veteran next to you and thank them and just embrace them. That's what we're here for. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the members of the Vietnam Veterans Recognition Committee of Central Florida who made this possible. We have a core group of people that will call themselves the Executive Committee. They're the real nucleus of the group, and then there's some other members who also joined in and supported the effort. So first, I'd like to introduce to you George Wanberg, the chairman of the Vietnam Veterans Recognition Committee of Central Florida. And George is a Marine who served in Vietnam. Next we have, next to George is Scott Bushnell, co-chairman. Scott was a Navy man, class of '64 United States Naval Academy, and a forward observer in Vietnam, and a classmate of our esteemed keynote speaker who we'll meet shortly. Next to him is Colonel H. Scott Smith, co-chairman. Colonel Smith served in the United States Air Force and was in during Vietnam as well. And I'm not sure he was in country, but he supported those who were, and we appreciate greatly his service and the job that he did on this parade. He was the parade coordinator that we had today. Fantastic job. And if you saw the logo, that was Scott Bushnell, the gentleman in the middle here, and also the website. These guys did a wonderful job. But as guys often get off track, like I demonstrated earlier, you need someone to keep us on track. And the fourth member of the executive committee, Lou Brown, co-chairman. Lou. Ceremony coordinator, that's really true, and also the manager of all these guys that were trying to do the right thing here. But Lou, seriously, was the glue that held it all together and did a wonderful job, gave above and beyond the call of duty. Lou, we thank you very much for that. We have other members of the Vietnam Veterans Recognition Committee. Would you please stand so I can see where you are, gentlemen? Dennis Bronson. Dennis, thank you very much for your work. These are media relations, gentlemen. I can't read your last name.
Nolte.
Nolte. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Colonel Brown, thank you very much. He's wearing his colonel uniform. The U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Tavares. Thank you, sir. Any others we missed of the committee members? Okay. Thank you very much, committee. These are just volunteers that came together and made this happen. And we're going to double their salary because they did so well. Okay. Well, thank you. Now we're going to pick up the pace a little bit on the introductions here. We have some elected officials who are here, and we really appreciate their coming. And I'm always worried about not including everybody. First, we have from Congressman Daniel Webster's office. He is actually out of the area today on a long-standing previous commitment. But he has for him in his place is Cindy Brown of his office. Cindy, there she is. Cindy, thank you very much for coming. She hand-delivered a letter from the congressman, which I'd like to read. It's not a very long letter, but it's heartfelt, and we want to recognize this great contribution to the ceremony here. Dear committee members and audience, today, on Armed Forces Day, I am honored to join you in recognizing the 40th anniversary that marked the end of the Vietnam War. Your support for our veterans at this Welcome Home celebration is a testament of your commitment to our country and community. For more than 2 centuries, the United States military has protected Americans against our enemies and the enemies of our friends. Throughout this time, the valor, dignity, and courage of our men and women in uniform have remained strong. From Valley Forge to Desert Storm, from Vietnam to Operation Enduring Freedom, the fighting spirit of the American soldier shines brightly. It is due to countless lives selflessly lived and lost in the defense of our country that we have the privilege to stand today free and grateful. We owe our veterans a debt of gratitude we can never repay. It is my privilege to join you in expressing gratitude and support to the members of our armed forces. I am honored to serve Central Florida community as your representative in the United States House of Representatives, your servant, Daniel Webster, Member of Congress. Thank you for being here. Thank you. We have a gentleman that I want to introduce and actually call him up, Jim Brody, on behalf of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. Jim is a true servant leader. He himself is a former Marine during the Vietnam War. And he actually served a term in the Florida House of Representatives as well. And then that was also part of a business career he had, a very successful business career. And then he joined the Department of Veterans Affairs and has been there for 16 years. And this gentleman is a veteran's veteran. Mr. Jim Brody, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Representative Metz. Good morning, everyone. I will be brief. I do want to bring, however, greetings from Florida Governor and United States Navy veteran Rick Scott, members of the Cabinet, our Attorney General Pam Bondi, our Chief Financial Officer Jeff Atwater, and our Commissioner of Agriculture Adam Putnam. Florida is the home for 1.6 million veterans. Over 140,000 of those are women veterans. The single largest component of our veterans community are Vietnam veterans, over 450,000 strong. And yet, less than 1/2 of Florida veterans are even enrolled in the VA. Before you leave today, please pick up one of these. It's a little pamphlet packed with powerful information about the services and benefits you have earned by your military service. They're available over in the tents. I wanted to also thank the Florida Veterans Foundation, chaired by John Haynes, who will be announced momentarily. They printed 100,000 of these benefit guides without a single penny cost to the Florida taxpayers. Before I leave the stage, let me also say that I want to salute each and every one of you. Thank you for your service. God bless you.
Thank you. And Jim came all the way from Tallahassee to be here with us this weekend. Thank you very much again, Jim. Next, we'll introduce Senator Alan Hayes. We appreciate his service to our country as a Coast Guardsman during the Vietnam War, and also as your state senator from District 11. Senator Hayes, thank you so much for being here. Commissioner Sean Parks is here. Commissioner Sean Parks is here, and he has a presentation from the Board of County Commissioners of Lake County. Commissioner Parks.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is truly a privilege and an honor to be able to do this today. And I want to thank my fellow Commissioner Tim Sullivan for joining us here today. It means a lot that you're here. So let's get right into it. This is a proclamation passed unanimously from the Board of County Commissioners from Lake County. Whereas the Vietnam War took place in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia from November 1st, 1955 until the United States Congress passed the Case Church Amendment in 1973, which prohibited the further use of American military forces in conflict. And whereas, because of the intense public opposition to the war that existed at the time, members of the United States Armed Services returned home to an unprecedented lack of formal positive recognition of the honorable service that they had provided on behalf of their country and the tremendous sacrifices they had made. And whereas the lack of formal welcome home parades and other traditional celebrations that were common for the United States returning from previous military engagements, coupled with verbal and sometimes physical abuse, resulted in great disillusionment, undeserved indignity, and often great suffering and anguish among the returning Vietnam veterans. And whereas of July 2011, the Department of Veteran Affairs had estimated that there were approximately 454,000 Vietnam veterans living in the state of Florida. And whereas May 30th, 2013 marks the 40th anniversary of the end of the United States involvement in the Vietnam War, the importance of the commemoration of this historic anniversary allows us to recognize Florida's aging Vietnam War veterans and finally provide these brave men and women a fitting expression of gratitude and opportunity to attempt to rectify these past injustices. Therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Lake County, Florida proclaims that May 30th, 2013 marks the 40th anniversary of the end of the United States involvement in the Vietnam War, and further, the Board recognizes and appreciates the honorable service and sacrifice of its Vietnam veterans. Thank you very much. This is quite an honor.
Commissioner Parks is going to see that that proclamation is displayed prominently in the historic courthouse or another appropriate facility of the county. Thank you. County Commissioner Tim Sullivan is here. Oh, there he is, General Sullivan. Tim Sullivan is a county commissioner, but he's also a retired brigadier general in the Florida Army National Guard and also a veteran's veteran. Thank you, Commissioner General. Lake County Water Authority Trustee Carolyn Mamone, would you please stand? Where's Carolyn? Oh, there she is. Carolyn, could you step in for a second? This young lady serves the public on the Lake County Water Authority, but I want to bring her in also to let you know that program that you're holding, she did all that design and artwork for that on her own time and did a great job. You also have another gentleman from Tallahassee, Major John Haynes, United States Marine Corps retired. Major Haynes, would you stand, please? Major Haynes is also a decorated war hero from Vietnam, and he's also chairman and CEO of the Florida Veterans Foundation. So we have with us some top veterans leaders in the state at this event today. I want to make sure everybody knows that Major Haynes came over from Tallahassee for that purpose, and he brought his wife with him. Ma'am, would you stand, please? Thank you, Mrs. Haynes. And then we have Barbara Radford from Tallahassee. Would you stand, Barbara? Remember what I said about Lou Brown and us? Well, she is that to them. She takes care of all that stuff for the Florida Veterans Foundation. Thank you very much for being here, Barbara. And I always worry about missing people that I should have introduced. We've tried to cover the gamut. If you're an elected official that hasn't been introduced, would you please stand and be recognized now? That's my way of covering myself. Oh, we have Judge Donna Miller here. Thank you, Judge Miller. Very nice to be here. why I asked the generic question. I learned that there's people here I didn't even know. And thank you so much, Judge, for being here. We have Neil Kelly, the clerk of the Circuit Court for Lake County, here in the back here. Neil, thank you very much for being here. He's our elected clerk of the court for all the courts. Okay, anyone else that we missed?
Tavares, Mayor Wolf. Mayor Wolf.
Oh, Mayor Wolf. Oh, yes, Robert Wolf. Oh, thank you, Mayor. He's all the way in the back there. Mayor Robert Wolf, City of Tavares. Thank you, Mayor. And please thank your council members and your city manager, Mr. Drury, and everybody on the team that worked so hard to help this committee. They were working on getting this set up. They had a lot of assistance from the City of Tavares, and it wouldn't have been possible without you. Thank you again, please. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, so that's the formal introductions that I have. Now, the next part of our program is the one that I've looked forward to the most. Well, almost the most. I mean, there's a couple of things coming up that are just key. One of them is testimonials from Vietnam veterans themselves. And we've asked them to come up and give a little bit of their experience, either in the war or when they came home. It's a minute or two each. They're not long speeches, but we thought it would be important to just hear from some of the veterans what they remember and share that. So the first was going to be Captain Stan Beach, United States Navy. And I'll bring this mic over. And they can all use this mic right here. Captain, thank you very much for sharing.
One of my favorite pieces of art that I keep in front of my desk to remember every day. It's a little, probably 6x6 piece of paneling that was painted in Vietnam. Only two colors were available, brown and green. And it's the face of a very weary-looking Marine. And on it, written over it, was the inscription that every name here, the face will disappear, and time will not defer, but there will always be the bond between who we are and where we were. Wherever I go, the Vietnam vets have a special bond. We all were probably different places, different times, but we shared the same dangers, we shared the same joys, and we shared some of the same smells. All of you will remember. A few months ago, I was at Camp Lejeune visiting wounded warriors. They knew I was a Vietnam vet, and I congratulated and thanked the young Marine for his service. He snapped to attention and said, "Sir, we simply stood on your shoulders." That's what they said. And it just took a little bit of study to realize that those vets coming home and being welcomed today are being welcomed by Vietnam vets, primarily. And combat leaders tell me all of the lessons that you guys honed and perfected in Vietnam, we're still using them, and they're working well. So I'm told, for example, that there are many, many more people who claim to be Vietnam vets than ever served in the country of Vietnam. Now those wannabes are suggesting something very important to take home. You were honorable. You were effective. And I think by the time the parade got to here, you're probably a foot taller. I salute you.
I'd like to invite next Michael Hurley to the stage. And I want you to know that this gentleman, along with another veteran who we're going to hear from named Troy Townsend, they made this. They designed it, and they made it.
I promise not to embarrass you.
I was told 1 to 2 minutes, and anybody that knows Mike Curley knows that he can say nothing in 1 or 2 minutes. I have a picture of my hero here. This is my brother David Hurley. He's in Europe as we speak tonight, traveling with wounded warriors, trying to give inspiration to the veterans in other countries with a group, and he's not here. But this picture I took of him in 1968, the Navy Vietnam Christmas Day, and I wanted to share that with you first. Chào anh, chào cô, chào em, chào ba, chào ông. Tên tôi là Mike Curley. Tôi nhà Việt Nam 2 năm. Tôi nhà Đà Nẵng 1 năm. Tôi nhà I was in Vietnam for 2 years. My name is Michael Hurley, and I didn't learn the language in Vietnam to kill babies. I learned the language because I love babies. I worked in orphanages over there, and I taught in their schools on my day off. I want to share that with you. I am not here for me today. I am here for you today. I'm a very humble, very simple carpenter. That's what I do for a living. I have the talent of making signs. I have the talent of being creative, along with my friend Troy Townsend. Troy, where are you? This is my brother Troy. He owns Townsend's sign shop in Leesburg, with the green car on top of the roof. We both served in Vietnam together, and we were both at Da Nang at the same time. This is my brother. He is the creative hands that created the backdrops and our floats. Thank you. I'd just like to read something briefly, and then I'll shut up. This Bible was given to me in 1966 by a Methodist church in Saratoga, Illinois, where I live. And I carried it with me through all 4 years in Vietnam. And I'd like to say one thing. During a terrible rocket attack that I endured and survived, I lay down on my belly for about 4 hours straight while the rockets and mortars hit around me. And I opened this Bible in the dark, and I laid my hand on it, and I was unconscious from fear. When I woke up, I put a mark in this Bible that I'm holding in my hands, very Bible, and this is what the Bible said. But I will deliver thee in that day, saith the Lord, and thou shalt not be given unto the hand of the men of whom thou art afraid. For I will surely deliver thee, and thou shalt not fall by the sword, but thy life shall be for a prey unto thee, because thou hast put thy trust in me, saith the Lord. And that was July 15th, 1967, Da Nang, Vietnam. I wanted to share that with you folks. I can only say one thing. We are here for a reason. And what is that reason? We designed this. I put the numbers up here because this is who I'm here for today. And I want you to look at these numbers. The United States Marines lost 14,838 men. The United States Army lost 38,209 men. The Department of the Navy lost 2,555. The United States Air Force lost 2,584. The Coast Guard lost 7. And I had to fill it out to make it balanced. So I put the state of Florida in there, and we lost 1,952 men in the state of Florida in that war. If we were to put their bodies end to end, and if they averaged 6 feet tall, their bodies would reach from here to Daytona Beach. And as long as we live, they live. Remember that. and I will end it with that. One more thing. We have something special. And you remember this. Happiness is beneficial for the body. But it is grief that it develops the power of the Spirit. Grief. And we've all shared that grief. That's why we're all brothers. And one more thing. These are being donated to the city of Tavares. Robbie Wolf and I have already had to talk this morning. And these will be in the Historical Society. Both this sign, this banner, the frame, and this one will be donated to the city of Tavares. And I want to thank the city of Tavares for our support. Thank you.
We're going to ask Troy Townsend to come back up now. Troy, please. Hoorah. Thank you so much. Hello, guys. Up until a very short time ago, I haven't been involved in anything relating to Vietnam. Mike got me a little bit involved. And as a Marine, Sergeant in the Marine Corps, as a Marine, I try to learn something new every day. And until he got me involved with this, until I came here today, I thought the Marines were the only ones there. And one of those reasons was when I joined the Marine Corps, I went into the buddy system, which a lot of you people know about. And back in the day, you can't tell it now, I was kind of a jock. And there were a couple of guys, and George Johnson and Andrew McDuffie, and they joined with me. Of course, because of that, I got time off out of the Marine Corps early. And I joined early. I was still in high school. The day after graduation, I stepped on a bus heading for Parris Island. Within 6 months, both those my fellow Marines were dead. And I didn't think about it much. I wasn't in Vietnam then. But then when I went to Vietnam, Mag 13 to 9, I came back years and years and years. Of course, my kids would ask me about it. Anyway, we found ourselves up in Washington, D.C. with my children. And they wanted to go to the Vietnam Wall. I did not want to go to the Vietnam Wall. Chills in my legs. I told him, I said, the only way I'll go is if there is a parking space on Pennsylvania Avenue at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll go, but I'm not going to park in the parking lot 4 blocks away. I'm assured that this isn't going to happen. We got there. There was parking space on Pennsylvania Avenue. But it just wasn't any parking space. Remember the book? You had to turn to the page to find the person, the individual. There's a little walkway that comes to it on Pennsylvania Avenue. That was parking space. So we got everybody out of the car. And my daughter and I walked up to the book. I said, well, we'll have to look in the book and see where the guys are. And I looked down to the book, and it was on the page with George. And at that time, I knew I was forgiven. Even though it's taken me a while past and other things to get used to that, I knew at that time I was forgiven. But I wasn't out of the woods yet. as we started walking down, as I took a step, my feet became very cold. As I descended down, that coldness went up my body until it got to about my waist, and I just lost it. I just couldn't go any further. But I did finally go down and find and make directions. You know, it's a lot of you guys out here have experienced some really, really bad things. We've been in very, very bad situations. But that was a personal thing that brought it to me, not a lot of the other stuff that I can't even remember anymore, thank God. But I want you to know that we'll all have to, we've got to live with it, but we are forgiven. We didn't do anything wrong. And I want to thank you all for being here today in support of yourself and support of me and letting this city know what we are about. We're productive, constructive, we're contributors. We're not users, we're not takers. We're contributors, and that's what we're here for. Thank you, appreciate it. Number 5. Next, we're going to hear from our chairman, George Longberg, United States Marine Corps. Good afternoon. I don't know if you've noticed, to my left, there are 2 captains. To my right, we have a general sitting over here. Scott Smith is an Air Force colonel. Scott Bushnell is a Navy lieutenant commander. And we have a Marine general. I have to salute him. I was a corporal in the Marine Corps. I'm very proud of it. I want to just say something about the wall. And what I'd like you to do is bow your heads and shut your eyes. And don't listen to me. I mean, don't look at me, but listen to what I have to say. There were 58,267 names that now are listed on the polished black wall, including those added in 2010. There are 3 sets of fathers and sons on the walls. 39,996 on the wall were just 22 years old or younger. 8,283 were just 19 years old. The largest age group, 33,103, were 18 years old. 12 soldiers on the wall were 17 years old. 5 soldiers on the wall were just 16 years old. And 1 soldier, PFC Dan Bullock, was 15 years old. 997 soldiers were killed on the first day in Vietnam. 1,448 soldiers were killed on their last day in Vietnam. 31 sets of brothers are on the walls. 8 women are on the walls nursing the wounded. And 244 soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War. 153 of them are on the wall. I just want to thank every single person here today and what you're doing to honor Vietnam veterans. And I just thank you all for being here today. It's been a complete pleasure to be part of this group. It was not a problem for us to do this. It was something that the Scotts and Lou and myself and Larry were totally blessed. And I just want to thank you all for being here and supporting us. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Captain Plum. We had the opportunity to have dinner with him last night. I didn't know what to make out of that whole deal, but it was good. We enjoyed it very much. Total pleasure. Captain Plum graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, class of 1964, and went on to fly an F-4 Phantom jets on 74 missions, successful missions. On his 75th mission, with only 5 days before the end of his tour of duty, Captain Plum was shot down, captured, tortured, and imprisoned in an 8x8 foot cell. I have had the opportunity 4 times to visit the Hanoi Hilton, and this is not a pleasure palace, I'll guarantee you. He spent the next 2,103 days as a prisoner of war in communist prison camps. During his nearly 6 years of captivity, Plum distinguished himself as a pro in underground communications. He was a great inspiration to other POWs and served as chaplain for 2 years. Since his return home, he has captivated more than 4,500 audiences in almost every industrial city around the world with stories that parallel his POW experience with the challenges of everyday life. Captain Plum's military honors include 2 Purple Hearts, the Legion of Merit, the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the POW Medal. I would like you all to stand and welcome Captain Plum.
Welcome home.
Thank you. That never gets old.
The prison cell I was in Vietnam was 8 feet long and 8 feet wide, exactly the width of this riser. I remember distinctly the dimensions of the little cell. I could pace 3 steps in one direction before I ran into a wall. Then I had the opportunity of turning around and pacing 3 steps the other way. Inside my new little home, I had nothing to do. I had no books to read, no windows to look out, no TV, telephone, BlackBerry, Bluetooth. I didn't have a pencil or a piece of paper for 2,103 days. To give you a better feel for that window of time, 2,103 days equates to age 24 to age 30 in my life. 1967 to 1973. Or turn your calendar ahead to the year 2019 and consider between today and 2019. The books you read and TV you watch and movies you'll see and kids you'll raise is a pretty good chunk of a guy's life. Now, I've been a very active guy, like each of you, on the go, all the time, searching for an extra 15 minutes a week to call my mom. And suddenly I had 24 hours a day for the next nearly 6 years. Now, I'm describing this scenario to you somewhat semi-dramatically. Please excuse the drama. In no way in this crowd would I ask for sympathy from my situation. But I think the most value I can be to you, my brother Vietnam veterans, the wives and mothers and sisters and brothers and children of Vietnam veterans, this community from all over Lake County, the most value I can be in the few minutes I'm speaking to you is to invite you into my little prison cell. Because there's a lot of positive things that go on in a prison cell. So for the next few moments, I'd like for you to try your best to smell the stench of my 2-gallon bucket in the corner I call my toilet. I'd like you to try to feel the baking heat of a tropical summer in a tin-roof prison cell, 120 degrees and not a breath of air. I'd like you to try to taste the salt in the corners of your mouth and the sweat and the tears and the blood. Not that you'll ever get there, but when you have that feel, you're going to have a couple of questions. How do you survive this? This is not a military person in this room, under this tent, that has not thought about what would happen to you if you're in a situation like this. And most of us felt that it would be worse than death to be in a prison camp with the torture and the bad food and the disease and the loneliness and the separation from all your loved ones. But I'm here to tell you that there is good news. There is good news about serving in a prison camp. And there's good news about the service that each of you vets served in Vietnam. And there's good news in the families as well. And I'm here to tell you that. But I'll tell you this, it doesn't take me very many miles, but 3 steps by 3 steps, I'm going nuts. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what could be worse than this? Well, let me tell you what's worse than the 8 feet between those prison walls is the 8 inches between your ears. See, this is a mental game. This prisoner of war stuff, this being a military guy, this having served in Vietnam, it's a mental thing. It's the way you think about these things. And I'm convinced you can be more incarcerated, you can be more seriously in a prison in that 8-inch box between your ears than those 8-foot walls that I was behind. And I hope that I can explain that to you today. But don't mind telling you this, it didn't take me very many miles, but 3 steps by 3 steps I was going nuts. I was having hallucinations. And when those first few months in that prison cell, and I'm thinking to myself, Charlie, if you're going to survive this, you're going to have to come up with something to do. Make a little game to play. Get a little creative here. Keep your mind active. I thought that's what I'll do. I'll make a little deck of cards. And I did. I constructed a little deck of playing cards, about the size of postage stamps. I tore these cards from 52 little strips of toilet paper. And I can tell you this with authority, toilet paper is tough to shuffle. You learn things like that in the military. What a privilege and a pleasure to be with my brothers and my sisters. I'm telling you, this is not easy to put this together. And I want to say another vote of thanks to this committee. Where'd Larry go? Ah, you're sitting over there. Larry, Matt, stand up again, my friend. He told us last night at dinner that this was not about him, it was not about politics. He said, I'm not even going to tell him that I'm their representative. But I'll tell you what, this is the real deal. Yeah. If you didn't vote for him last time, and then these other knuckleheads now, we got 2 Marines on the committee, as you know. George and Larry are both Marines, so I'm going to talk a little bit slower. I'm sorry. From this point on, I will not say anything bad about the Marine Corps or any other handicap. Scott Bushnell, my classmate from the Naval Academy, we go back how many years? 50 next year is our 50th reunion, as a matter of fact. Ken Middleton, you heard on the bagpipes. Where's Ken? Are you still around? In your cute little skirt? Ken's our classmate as well. We've got one other classmate in this crowd, and I've lost him now. But hey, there you go, stand up. We didn't know each other very well, but this is about the 64th. You're the proud past of 1964 United States Naval Academy. And of course, the other Scott Smith, Colonel Scott, and Lou Brown back here. Great committee, great committee. Thanks for putting this together. It means a lot to all of us. Of course, what an honor it is to be with one other Navy captain that still fits in his uniform. Chaplain Beach has more war stories than I do. You ought to be up here talking about that. I really, really appreciate your service, my friend, in Vietnam, and each and every one of you. I think I can describe you, the Vietnam veterans, and your families and supporters here as being parachute packers. Explain that. I sat down in a restaurant in Kansas City not so long ago, about 2 tables over. A guy kept looking at me. I didn't recognize it, Jim. He stood up. He walked over to my table. He pointed at me, and with a very serious look on his face, he said, "You're Captain Plum." I looked up and I said, "Yes, sir, I'm Captain Plum." He said, "You're that guy. You flew jet fighters in Vietnam. You're a fighter pilot. Part of that Top Gun outfit off the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. And you were shot down. You parachuted in enemy hands. You spent 6 years as a prisoner of war." Somewhat dumbfounded, I looked up at this guy and I said, "How in the world did you know all that?" He finally cracked a smile and he said, "Because I packed your parachute." Well, I was speechless. The best I could do was stagger to my feet, reach out a very grateful hand of thanks. He came up with just the proper words. The guy grabbed my hand and he pumped my arm and he said, "I guess it worked." Indeed it did, my friend, and I must tell you, I've said a lot of prayers of thanks for your nimble fingers as a parachute rigger. But I had no idea I'd ever had the opportunity to express my gratitude to you in person. He said, "Were all the panels there?" I really appreciate your concern, and I got to be honest with you, no, they weren't. Of the panels, I had 3 torn panels in that parachute, but it didn't hamper my safe descent. You did your job. It was my fault that the panels were torn. I ejected from that F-4 Phantom jet 600 knots close to the ground. I was well outside the envelope of your parachute. I said, let me ask you a question. Do you keep track of all the parachutes you pack? Do you know of all the lives you saved? And I said, no. Now, this is the most important part of the conversation that night. Maybe the most important thing I say to you today. I think it deals directly for why we're here and our responsibilities in communities like this. Here's what he said. He said, "No, I don't keep track of all the parachutes I pack. It's enough gratification for me just to know that I've served." Here's a sailor, well below the waterline of this aircraft carrier, a parachute rigger. Stands at a long wooden table and he weaves the shrouds and he folds the silk panels of these parachutes and passes them along one after another, just doing his job, while the jet jockey, while the Top Gun zooms around the sky at the speed of sound, and I couldn't have cared less about the guy down there in the hole. Until one day my parachute came along and he packed mine up for me. So the question becomes, who packs your parachute? And maybe more importantly, who looks to you for that kind of strength in time of great need? Well, my parachute was pretty well packed. When I was shot down over enemy territory, only 3 torn panels, that was enough for a safe descent. So my physical parachute, okay, but I want to talk about mental parachutes and spiritual parachutes, the things that protect us when we're in trouble. My mental parachute had the skills of my craft, engineering degree from the Naval Academy. My emotional parachute, pretty stable guy. My spiritual parachute, I knew the Lord. Got my parachute packed, same place you did, early in life. I know some of you represent some pretty small communities around here. I grew up in Lecompton, Kansas, town of some 325 souls, and a couple of Presbyterians. I was a rich kid, filthy rich, I was. Yeah. Now, the family didn't have any money, but we were rich in family unity and love, and I had a great childhood, but I grew up in a three-room house, three-room. No plumbing, three-room. Not three bedrooms either, three rooms total. In fact, I shared the only bedroom with my big sister and my two little brothers. In fact, I never slept alone until I got married. Well, you aren't laughing at that. I was a Boy Scout, saw a Cub Scout a little bit ago, and good to see some young people here. I was a 4-H'er.
All right.
Yeah, and got my parachute packed. Now, don't miss the metaphor, okay? People gave of themselves, asking nothing in return, okay? To give me some of those nuggets I was going to need when the going got tough. And they were community leaders, and they were preachers and teachers, and the coach, I'll never forget, named Smith. If Clarence Smith were alive today, I would have called him this morning to thank this guy for packing my parachute. This ragtag basketball, we lost and lost and lost. The last game of the season, we lost again. Imagine one 13-year-old dejected kid wandering off to the locker room, and here comes the coach. And he caught up with me. This guy was a veteran from World War I. He had shrapnel in his leg from his war, and he caught up with me, and I felt his arm over my sweaty shoulder. And I looked at the coach, tough disciplinarian. All I could think of to say was, "I'm sorry, Coach, I guess this team's just a bunch of losers." The coach squeezed my shoulder. He sunk his fingernails into the flesh. He was about to say something he didn't want me to forget. He said, "Son, what do you think you're a loser, or what do you think you're a winner? You're right." I didn't understand it. I asked him the next day, "Coach, what did that mean?" He said, "Just this." He said, "Life is a choice. Every day of your life is going to be your beautiful choice." He said, "I don't care where you go. I don't care what kind of a scrape you get yourself into someday." I don't know how he had that kind of premonition that I would ever be a prisoner of war, unless it was the way I played basketball. He said, "You're going to have some tough times. You're going to have some good times." He said, "I learned in my war," he said, "that the tough times are the really valuable times. And the choices you make in the tough times of your life will be what forms your character for the rest of your life." Oh, those are kind of harsh words. Well, I graduated from middle grade school. Graduated top of my class. Of 2. At age 17, I'd never seen the ocean. I'd never ridden in an airplane. But I got on that Greyhound bus. 2 days later, as many of you did, just as I did, I pledged to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We wrote that check, you know, that check made out to the United States of America that you and I signed. The value up to and including our life. What a strong commitment that was, and I had no idea what it was going to take to fulfill it. Well, we learned a lot. Scott and Ken and I learned a lot at the boat school. Learned to tie knots and send the Morse code and drive the ships around the Chesapeake Bay. Lucky for us, we got our parachute packed. And the biggest parachute packer, you guys, my classmates will remember this guy, Admiral Charles Kirkpatrick. This guy would stand up in front of the pep rallies before the football games. He would clench his fist, you could see the veins running his brow. And he would say, "You guys can do anything you set your minds to do." You guys can do anything you set your minds to do. This was our motto. Did we believe it? Was it hype? Was he messing with our minds? Mental manipulation? Did it work? Those 4 years, the Naval Academy produced 2 Heisman Trophy winners in 4 years. Roger Staubach, Joe Molino was the number one college team in the nation for a while. Best of all, Navy beat Army 4 times straight. And a lot more. Interesting story, said Captain, but what's it got to do with me? What's it got to do with today? What's it got to do with this celebration, this welcome home late? Just this. I was empowered by both those guys. Both the coach and the suit empowered me. They empowered me to win, which was beautiful, but more importantly, they empowered me to fail. Did you get that part? Life is a choice, said the coach. You can do anything you set your mind to do, said the suit. Those are positive or negative. You can take those either way. They empowered me to win. They empowered me to fail. Most importantly, they empowered me to make the choice between the two. And so it is in the life of every Vietnam veteran. We have the choice, guys and gals. We really do. We can choose to be bitter about our war. We can choose to crawl over in the corner. We can choose to ask our government to take care of us for the rest of our life because of our time in service and the pain that we shared. We can choose to do that. We can step back and become the victim. We can crawl over our little imaginary prison cell, our little 8-inch prison cell, and we can blame somebody else for the problem, feel sorry for ourselves, and we can atrophy and die. There's another choice. It's our choice, okay? We can be proud of our service. We can be proud that we have served. We can be proud that we did a whole lot of things that a whole lot of other people didn't do. We can be proud of that flag. And we can salute it every chance we get. And we can tell the kids of these communities about our service. And that's the choice that we make. Well, I graduated from the Naval Academy with these 3 knuckleheads, and I didn't graduate top of my class, you know, like Ken and the other guy. In fact, my claim to fame was I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible. I threw that hat in the air, killing all those ensign bars. What a proud day in my life. I married my high school sweetheart, lovely blonde girl from Kansas, under the arch of swords. My buddies were holding their swords up as we came down the chapel on flight training, Pensacola, and Beeville, Texas. John McCain was my flight instructor in Beeville. Went on to Meridian, Mississippi, and out to San Diego, where I flew the first adversarial flight for the Top Gun School. Exciting times, zooming around those jets. Launched on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. I stood on the flight deck at Pier 3 in North Island. Many of you have been there. You launched out of there for Vietnam. And I picked up my wife on the pier, and I waved to her, and I promised her I'd be back in 8 months. Another one of those commitments. It was 5 days from the end of my tour. 5 days from going home. George Joliet, 74 combat missions, over 100 carrier landings, a pretty well-seasoned jet fighter pilot, 5 days to go. Launched on that aircraft, from that aircraft carrier on an Alpha strike. It was sanctioned by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was straight from the Pentagon. We had 3 aircraft carriers, 5 Air Force bases on targets in North Vietnam. The 19th of May. That's tomorrow. In the prison camp, we never asked each other, what day did you get shot down? The question was, what day did you die? Because we all felt like our life had just ended. Now, I've thought about that a lot, you know, having been shot down in prison, and each of you veterans in the crowd has thought about that too. And I don't know what you've decided before, you know, you went into combat, but I'll tell you what I decided. I don't think I can make it. I don't think I can hack that. I've heard about the disease. I've heard about the torture. I've heard about the being cut off, the loneliness, the frustration, the humiliation of being a prisoner of war. In fact, I told my guys, my buds, hey, if I'm shot down, send my stuff back to my wife, because if I'm captured, I'm not going to make it. That's the way I felt. That's the way I felt. My RIO, radar intercept officer, my co-pilot, Gary Anderson, and I took off on the morning of the 19th of May. We didn't come back. We were hit by a surface-to-air missile. A SAM exploded with some 12,000 pounds of jet fuel, sent that airplane topsy-turvy end over end down towards that rice paddy. He ejected, our parachutes opened, and we came floating down over enemy territory. I know many of you have been in those parachutes, but I want to talk about not the nylon ones, and talking about the parachutes of life, because that's the metaphor. Okay? The fender benders that you and I get ourselves into. The little gut wrenchers, you know. Talk about something as insignificant as being cut out of your lane on 441, something as major as the loss of a child. See, that's where your value lies. I'm convinced. That's where your value as a soldier lies. That's where your value as a brother lies. Is when tough times are going on. Because anybody can handle the easy stuff, you know. It doesn't take too much talent for that. Our true value shows up when the heat's on, when things are tough, when you get blown out of the sky. That's where it occurs. So how do you handle that? How do you handle that? Well, I ejected. He ejected. We're floating down over enemy territory, scared to death. The first thing I did, I'd been trained as a fighter pilot. I looked up and I counted the panels in my parachute. That technique is called assessing your support group. I looked down the unknown. They're shooting at me. The audacity of this enemy, they're shooting at me. Don't they know I'm the top gun? Don't they know I'm bulletproof? Look, they just knocked down my multi-gazillion-dollar airplane, and now they're shooting at the pilot, and I'll tell you this, so you can identify with this one. When you're dodging bullets, it's tough to come up with a long-range plan. So what do? You're way ahead of me. I took a deep breath. As that old gunny sergeant taught me on the rifle range, let about half of it out, tried to calm myself, nod my head and said a prayer. I'll never forget that prayer. I thought about that prayer a lot over those next 6 years in those various prison cells. I thought back to that moment in time when I'm dangling from that parachute, said to myself, well, dummy, why didn't you make a deal with God? Promise to be a righteous, sober, godly guy the rest of my life. Lord, all I need from you is a little wind. 10, 12 knots, gusting to 40. Please. I guess I didn't feel in much of a negotiable position. But just pray for the guts it was going to take to survive. I'm going to pray for my wife. See, this is my war, not hers. Yet in the end of the war, my wife would feel more pain from the war than I did. I had to go around talking about waist deep in a rice paddy descended upon by about a gazillion, and they stripped me of everything I had. They took my flight gear, my clothing, my personal possession, my torso harness, my G-suit. They even took my name, and they gave me a name from their language just to humiliate me for the next nearly 6 years. Dragged me around village to village, camp to camp, tortured for 2 days with ropes and irons. And if anybody wants to know about that, bring me a 20-foot piece of rope and I'll show you. Now, here's an interesting thing, and I think that'll make a lot of sense, especially to you vets. You remember the code of conduct, right? If you're a prisoner of war, give name, rank, serial number, date of birth. That's what we were all taught. And that's what I thought I was strong enough to maintain. The code of conduct. Never give up. Name, rank, serial number, date of birth. And every fighter pilot there knew the code of conduct. And every fighter pilot in that prison camp thought they could stick with name, rank, serial number, date of birth. It didn't take the Vietnamese very long, probably 3 or 4 hours, and a whole lot of pain. And I broke. I gave them more than names, ranks, serial number, and date of birth. And I felt very guilty about that. And I paced in that prison cell, feeling sorry for myself, feeling very guilty that I hadn't been as strong as I thought I would be, feeling like I had not only denied the code with my brothers, but denied that flat, and denied my God. I heard in the far corner of the prison camp a chirping noise of a cricket in the corner. I paid no attention to this cricket, because it had all varieties of bugs and snakes and rats in that cell. Some of them were friendlier than others. And one more cricket didn't bother me in the least. And yet the longer I listened, the more rhythmic that sound became. And I'm thinking, that's a pretty educated little critter. Maybe I can teach him to sing. I walked over to the corner of my prison cell, and I found in the corner no cricket, but a little piece of wire. It was about that long. It was about the gauge of a coat hanger, okay? And it was poked through a hole at the base of the prison cell wall and scratching on my concrete floor. Are you with me? Can you imagine what might be going through your mind? Now keep in mind, you're really feeling sorry for yourself, okay? You're feeling very embarrassed because you haven't been strong. And you're in this little pity party, this little 8-inch box, and I'm thinking to myself, somebody's trying to communicate with me, and it's got to be another American, and probably a fighter pilot, since that's who's in these prison camps. It was an air war over North Vietnam. And so we were being shot down, and we had a prison camp full of pilots, okay? The poor guys in the South, you guys weren't so lucky as we were. They didn't take prisoners, very many in the South. They killed you guys. We were the lucky ones. But the point was, we're all these fighter pilots in this prison camp. And I'm thinking to myself, my first thought, whoa, boy, I really would like to talk to another fighter pilot. We could tell some stories, and man, wow, what an opportunity. Because by this time in my experience, I am losing track. I'm alone in this prison cell. I don't know what's a real memory, what's a hallucination of a memory. I need a baseline, okay? I need to validate my sanity. I need to connect with somebody else. Now, what's the overriding emotion? Why didn't I tug on this wire? Guilt. Feeling that I was lower. The last thing I want to do is compare myself to somebody who was stronger than I. And the guy's probably smarter than I, probably older, probably more mature, probably outranks me. I think I'm going to let that wire just go and crawl over the corner of this prison cell and wait. You know, we could wait for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, and surely someday the Marines will break down the gates, and I'll be set free, and I'll never have to take another risk the rest of my life. There's an interesting word, risk. You know, I think that's how we meet our fears. And sometimes it's in the depths of despair. It's in the absolute worst pain you're in. You got to take another risk. You got to kick down what's left of your comfort zone, get further outside yourself, go tug on a wire. Now this wasn't easy. This wasn't easy. The last thing I wanted to do was to admit my failure, expose myself to somebody else. But the wire kept tugging, so I sweated bullets for a couple of hours and finally got up the guts to reach over and grab that wire and tug. And the wire tugged back. And I tugged again, and it disappeared. But the wire came back about an hour later. This time the wire had a little note wrapped around the end of it. This note was written on a dirty piece of toilet paper, just blobs on this watered up piece of toilet paper. I could barely make it out, but it said, memorize this code, then eat this note. Now, I volunteered for a lot of things in the Navy. I did it. I memorized the code. I ate the note. The note was written in ink made from brick dust or ashes with a quill pen that was made from a stick of bamboo. And I could barely read it, but it said A, B, C, D, E, the letters of the alphabet across the top. Then the next line was F, G, H, I, J. 5 lines and 5 rows of the alphabet. Numbers down the side and across the top. indicating any letter would be represented by two numbers. Thank you, Luke. What a service this is. She knew I needed a drink. 5 lines, 5 rows. Numbers down the side, across the top. Indicating any letter of the alphabet would be represented by two numbers. Okay? Number of the line, okay, then the number of the row. Got it? First line, first row was A. Okay? One tug, one more tug. Z, fifth line. You think your email is cumbersome? Did it work? This crazy, silly, archaic code became our language. No more than that, it became our lifeblood. It was absolutely vital in the prison camp to communicate. And it wasn't the words. That's the interesting part. It wasn't the words that we were using or the phrases or the sentences. The life-saving part of communication in a prison camp is the simple validation of another human being. Because in those cells, if you were in solitary confinement and it was dark, you lose track. You wouldn't know if you were alive or dead. The simple tugging on a wire, to have that wire tugged back, meant two things. Number one, I'm alive. Somebody's responding to something I'm doing physically, thus I exist. Number two, somebody cares. How's that apply in your life? You see, I think it's important for veterans to reach out and touch other people with our message. If you're one of those guys that don't want to talk about your experience, if you're one of those guys that get all heated up, I would encourage you to write about it if you can't talk about it. I would encourage you to talk to you. They really want to know, and they're afraid to ask. And it doesn't have to be all the bad stuff, you know. It could be the buddies you met, the good times you've had, you know, the things that the positive parts that you did. On the other end of the wire, Lieutenant Commander Bob Shoemaker, fighter pilot extraordinaire, astronaut candidate. Better than that. Here's a parachute packer. Shoemaker had been in that prison camp for 2 years when I showed up. He was there a total of 8 years. Two of those years, the first 2 years in that prison camp, he was piecing together little bits of wire, stuffing them out a hole in his cell wall, and across the storeroom. There was a storeroom between our 2 prison cells. He fixed that wire over the boxes and around the shelves and threw the ropes into the little hole in my cell wall 14 feet away. Unbelievable. Just to contact another American. Just to pack my parachute. Just to bring me around. His first words. How you doing, buddy? My first words. I'm doing terrible. Buddy. He said, my president sent me over here. It's his dirty war, not mine. I did not start this Vietnam War. He did. And all those politicians back home. And now we're out here fighting and dying because of those decisions those silly guys are making. And it's not fair what's going on in my life. And it's not my fault. And I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. And the enemy, the North Vietnamese, they signed the Geneva Convention. Now they're torturing prisoners. It's not fair what's going on in my life. It's not my fault. And I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. And it was not my private airplane I flew in here, you know. That was the U.S. government airplane. Says so right on the tail. Congress bought it. I didn't. They should be here. I should not. This whole thing is not fair what's going on in my life. Ever feel that way? But it's not my fault. Yes, we all do. I'm just the victim of circumstances. Shoemaker stopped me. He said, wait a minute. What? He said, it sounds like you've got a disease, a very common disease with the prisoners of war. He said, a lot of guys get it and some guys die from it. Oh, man, what's the name of this disease? I said, well, around here we just call it prison thinking. I said, prison thinking? He said, Roger, you think you are a prisoner. I'm thinking, well, duh. Look at this. I am bleeding from 4 open wounds. I had 4 holes in my body where blood's running out. We had no medical care. And just had 4 holes. got big boils, big carbuncles. We never knew why, but the first summer there, every prisoner of war had these big boils all over our face. Could barely see through these boils all over the rest of my body. I'm down to 115 pounds. My sole possession in life is a rag I had knotted around my waist to hide my nudity. Clearly, I'm rotting away in a communist prison camp, and now, to add insult to injury, they put me next to a positive thinker. I kept talking. Said, and in addition to that, my friend, I must confess to you that I broke. I wasn't as strong as I wanted to be. I wasn't as good as I thought I could be. Shoemaker said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "I've been here for 2 years. I've yet to meet a pilot that didn't break." He said, "But the good news is we have great leadership in this camp. We have military leadership that's redefined this code of conduct, that's protected us all. And here's what Jim Stockdale, Captain Jim Stockdale, we call him CAG, he was our commander of our air group. Here's what Stockdale tells us. He said, you go into torture until you feel that you're going to be permanently damaged. And then you give them bad information, bit by bit, so that you can come back to yourself and regroup and catch your breath and then go fight the battle again." Jim Stockdale, because he said, we are going home with honor, but we're not going home. Pretty heavy stuff, pretty heavy stuff. So Shoemaker said, yeah, this prison thinking stuff, he said, you may die from it. I said, well, tell me what the antidote is. Tell me how you survive this. He said, well, first of all, you realize that we're all here, and we've come from different parts of the country, and we're different services, okay? And we're different colors, and we're different ages, and we're different ranks. He said, we're all in this thing together because we're Americans. He said, and then he said, you got to have courage. He said, we're facing a tough situation, but we've got to be honest with ourselves and with each other. He said, you have to have faith. He said, we have church service every Sunday. We're in individual cells, okay, all over this camp and all over this country, the enemy's country. But on Sunday morning, about the time the sun comes up, we all, in our individual cells, we get on our knees and we pray. And we pray for the sick and injured. And we pray for our buddies in the South. And we pray for our families that are back home praying for us. He said, and then you're strong. He said, we've got a unit here. We're military men. We have a commander. And we're taking directions from our military commander. Because one of these days we will, in fact, go home with honor. Well, he sure relieved my pain that day, telling me that, yeah, I was weak, but so was everybody else. We're all human beings. We all tried our best. And even though we didn't get up quite over the bar, that doesn't mean that we don't stop trying. Man, they sure packed my parachute. A great parachute packer, Bob Shoemaker, but not the best. Probably the best parachute packed in a place turned out to be a Navy sailor. An enlisted guy, Seaman Douglas Hegdell, from Clark, South Dakota. Wait a minute, you said they're all fighter pilots. How does a sailor get into a prison camp in an air war over North Vietnam? Well, he fell off his ship. He used to tell us, I wasn't captured like you pilots. I was rescued. I've had my jokes laughed at before, but not quite like that. So there's Doug Hegdell, okay? Seaman Douglas Hegdell. Wow. So he shows up at that prison camp, okay? He didn't know where he was. He just fallen off the ship in the middle of the night. that washes short. We have these contests, just for something to do. We would tug on the wires and we would pass around a little questionnaire. Who's the oldest in the prison camp? Who's got the most kids back home? Who's been here the longest? Just for something to do. I'm not to the punchline yet. Once we have the high-fast, low-slow contest to try to determine what fighter pilot that jumps out of his jet going highest and fastest, who jumps out going lowest and slowest. Well, high-fast contest is won by some Air Force jock who claims he punched out of his F-105 at 52,000 feet, 1,000 miles an hour. Then the low-slow contest was won by the Navy sailor. 12 feet at 15 knots, right there. But here's the interesting part, and why I tell you the story. This lowly sailor, this insignificant, lowest ranking, youngest, most immature guy, he didn't seem to suffer from this imposter. The sailor didn't seem to blame anybody else for his problems like the more mature, higher ranking fighter pilots did. The sailor didn't seem to feel sorry for himself and shower himself with pity and decide that he didn't have any control of his destiny, like the more mature officers, fighter pilots did. The sailor kicked down what was left of his comfort zone, got further outside himself, decided as bad as this looks, there's some value here, and I'm going to find out what it is. The sailor challenged himself to find the positive part of a prison cell. He began by tugging on the wire and began by collecting all of our names. He memorized our names, 200 names, put our names in his songs, sung those songs over and over and over until he finally got them all. Went back through his list, he memorized our identifier or social security number, 200 different long numbers. He developed a photographic memory. He still wasn't finished. Went back to the list, memorized our hometowns all across the country, then he memorized our next of kin all across the country, and finally, I'm not kidding, the sailor memorized the telephone numbers of each of the relatives of each of the prisoners. That took 2 years. About that time in the war, the North Vietnamese were getting a lot of bad press internationally for their treatment of prisoners. So they decided they're going to send somebody home early before the end of the war. The first guy they went to was John McCain, my old flight instructor. And McCain at that time had 7 broken bones when he was shot down. They were twisting his broken bones to torture the poor man. And then they said, we're going to send you home. At that time, his dad was Sink Pack, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific. John's dad was in charge of the Vietnam War while John and I were over there. And so John said to them, in your dreams you're sending me home early. I'd never embarrass my father by doing that. I'd never give up on my other prisoners of war, my buddies. You take your idea and shove it. And he got in a lot of trouble for it. They put him in solitary confinement for another 2 years for doing that. So he's not going, and they're still looking for someone, and somebody's going to get hurt. So our senior man, Dick Stratton, sent a message to the sailor. Son, I want you to volunteer to go home first. The sailor, the one that fell off the ship, sit back. Sir, with all due respect, I would rather stay here with the team. Dick Stratton sits back. That's not an option. Here's a direct order. Shove off. Sailor said, aye, aye, sir. Home he came. Now, write the script on the same. What would you expect of this guy to do? 2 years in prison by accident. He's been starved, humiliated, lonely, tortured. He hasn't seen a woman in 2 years. Suddenly, he's free on the streets of San Diego. What can you expect of this prisoner? Oh, did I tell you he was a parachute packer? What do you suppose he did? The sailor went from west coast to east, north to south. Spent his own time, his own money. Went through each one of the hometowns he'd memorized. Dialed each one of those telephone numbers he'd memorized. Spoke to each one of the relatives he'd memorized and told them that their prisoner was alive. Don't tell him about your applause. I'll see him next week. We're having the 40th year reunion of the Prisoners of War homecoming. When we came home, President Nixon invited us all to the White House. And we had the biggest meal the White House has ever served on the 24th of May of 1973. The chef is still alive. He's going to prepare the same meal for us at the Nixon Library next week. There's a lot of publicity around this, and you may see some of it. In fact, day before yesterday, I was in New York City interviewing with Diane Sawyer on ABC, and that's supposed to air on this Monday night. And the other guys are being interviewed for this thing too, because we're very proud of our heritage there. And so at this reunion, of the 591 guys that came home, there will probably be 250 or 300 guys and their wives and families will be at the Nixon Library in California for this thing. And we've done pretty well. And the generals will march in, and the admirals will march in, and the congressmen and the senators will march in, and the governors and the ambassador will march in, and the guy that gets the standing ovation, the Navy sailor. A real parachute packer. As I've been describing this parachute packer metaphor to you, anybody come to mind? Yeah, I'm sure. A lot of you in here have packed my parachute. I'm looking at one Air Force general that wasn't introduced a little bit ago. Sit up, Angelo. Angelo Prisonelli. He's embarrassed to stand up. Ed Nemick is in this crowd. I just haven't seen you yet, but I know you're in. There you go. Sit up, Ed. Ed and I are aardvarks. That was our squadron mascot in VF-114 on the aircraft carrier takeoff, and then the carrier air group 11. And many of the rest of you, and many of you come up and told me your stories, and I appreciate you very much because you've packed my parachute. And of course, my little lady, see, I thought about her a lot while I was in a prison camp, my parachute packer back there, and I would fast forward my mind about an hour a day just to be with her mentally. And I planned the next 20 years of my life around her. I had 20 years of her birthdays, and I did every present for 20 years. I had Christmases. I had ornaments on every tree for 20. I had meals. I figured out 3 meals a day, 20 years. What some doozies. What a menu. I had cheeseburgers and chocolate malts. I had no rice. The day finally came. The war ended. We traded prisoners. 10,000 of them for 591 of us. And I got on that big Air Force C-141 from Hanoi, North Vietnam to Park Air Force Base in Philippines, a 90-minute ride. What a treat that was. What a great day in my life. And of course, we hit the tarmac and Clark ran down the ladder, saluted the generals and the big shots that were there, and ran to the first phone I could find to call. Tell her the good news. But she had gone. I called my parents back in Kansas. What has happened to my wife? I'll never forget my mother's words. They ring in my ears like this was yesterday. Mom said, son, I'd give 10 years of my life if I didn't have to tell you this. But your wife hung on for 5 years, and then just 3 months ago, she filed for divorce. She's engaged to another guy. I spent the next 2 weeks at Great Lakes Mental Hospital near Chicago. I felt strong. You know, I just overcome this big problem. Now what do I do for an encore? But I had that figured out. I had the plan for the rest of my life. It had changed a lot since my wife had not waited for me. I'm going to go to some little town in the middle of nowhere where they've never heard of Charlie Plum. And if they have, I'm going to change my name. Because I don't want to ever talk about Vietnam again. I don't want anybody to know that I was ever a prisoner of war over there. I don't want to live through that pain one more time. Because that 6 years, the very best that time in my life can be is the 6 years that I can forget. And I'm going to try to forget it. Then we had a little press conference in the basement of that hospital. I was the first guy back in the Midwest, and everybody wanted to know the story. And I found myself surrounded by 100 photographers and reporters wanting to know what happened to me. And I told them my story. On the way back up to my hospital room, just as the elevator doors closed, a young reporter sneaked in. I found myself nose to nose with this guy. Young guy, but lines of anguish in his brow and tears coming down his face. And he said, "Mr. Plum, you really got to me in there." He said, "Man, I've had a miserable year. My family is falling apart. My job is terrible." And he said, "I'm worthless. I've even considered that I don't want to go on living." He said, "You've given me hope. You've given me hope." Suddenly I saw some value in this experience and the telling of it. So I wrote a book, my autobiography. It's called I'm No Hero. And I started to promote that book. And I made over 400 presentations the first year I was home. All over the country, finding that yes, people did need to know my story. And yes, there was value in my service even after I came home. By touching the lives of people. And I'm not the only one with a story. 591 of us have that story, and you have that story as well. And the value of your story is in the telling of it. It's valuable to you. It's valuable to the people that hear it. And I don't know if you really figured this out, but while I've been standing here talking to you for the last 35 or 40 minutes, I'm standing here talking to myself. This is my therapy. Because I get out there in the highways and byways of life, and I'm having one of those kind of days, man. This is really going to be terrible, and I'm trying to make it home to my wife, and I'm pounding on some ticket counter, some little airport in the middle of nowhere, and I'm blaming some agent who I didn't get on that airplane. It left without me, and it's not my fault. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. Wait a minute, you hypocrite. You're going to tell the Vietnam vets, Lake County, Florida, that it's going to be their choice, that now that we have been welcomed home, there's still a fight to be won. And that's the fight for the younger generation. It's a fight for the communities that we love. It's a fight for that flag. And you're going to tell them that even with their pain, that they need to take a risk. They need to step outside. They need to go tuggle on a bunch of wires. Well, we've done pretty well with POWs. We're setting records, you know. 591 guys, we produced 27 generals or admirals in the military. No group is 50 there. Most of us retired as senior grade military officers. We have doctors and lawyers and preachers and teachers and bishops and judges and senators. Two United States senators, one just ran for president, for goodness sake. We have an ambassador from our number, a governor from our, many mayors. And they're telling us today we're probably healthier mentally and physically than if we hadn't been shot down. That makes sense? Here's the key, okay? Getting blown out of the sky can actually be good for you. It's true. And whatever pain that you face as a military guy, as a civilian person, whatever challenges you face can be worthwhile. Because adversity is a horrible thing to waste. How do you waste adversity? Blame other people for your problems. Feel sorry for yourself. Go into the woe is me, woe is life. Shoemaker on the end of the White River, remember him? Full two-star admiral today. The kids have memorized the names. Doug Hagdahl. He's a teacher. In fact, some of you went through the survival school at Warner Springs in San Diego with Doug Hagdahl. He's taught at that school now for a long time. My backseater came back to the States, went back to flying Navy jets off aircraft carriers. Some guys never learn. No, sad to tell you that Gary Anderson died in an airplane, as a matter of fact, fairly soon after we got back. My wife, my ex-wife, married the guy she was engaged to. They're living happily ever after. I married a wonderful lady. We have 4 kids, all in their 20s. I ran a marathon a few years ago in Alaska. It's called the Midnight Sun Run. It's the Saturday closest to the longest day of the year. I chose that marathon because I figure I'm going to need 24 hours of daylight to run 26 miles. Took 2 of my kids with me, Joe and Evie, my oldest, at the hotel the night before the race, talking to the kids. Hey kids, this is your dad's craziness, you know, and I don't mean to impose on your vacation, so tomorrow morning, it's an early go. I don't even know where this race is. You guys take it easy, have breakfast, and I'll be back tomorrow afternoon to see you. Oh, it was a hot day in Ranchers. I'm halfway around this course, chugging along there, sweating like crazy, thinking, man, the most beautiful sight in the world is going to be that finish sign. And it wasn't. It was under the finish sign. Here's Joe, Evie, 2 of my kids cheering on the old man. When I finally got my breath, I looked at my kids and I said, you just don't know what it means to your father to have you here, but how did you find the finish line? He said, well, Dad, we shared a cab with a couple of guys in the hotel. They knew where it was. I said, how did they know where it was? Well, Dad, they ran the race. They came back to the hotel. They had breakfast. What's the message? Why did your life and mine intersect today? I hope and pray that none of you ever face those 8 foot ones, but you will face 8 inchers. We'll all get there. Our kids get there. Our community gets there. We get to blame other people for our problems, feeling sorry for ourselves. If in fact, when you recognize that you're getting into that situation, if you can take a risk, it's tough. It's tough when you're feeling pain, you know, to take a risk. Kick down what's left of your comfort zone. Get further outside yourself. Go tug on a wire and pack some parachutes. Apply the faith and the courage and the commitment. And you can do anything you set your mind to do. Great deal with you. Thank you.